Don't throw rotten tomatoes on me. It's just my viewpoint. Liquidy on the face, like a jellyfish slightly. Really asks for a little bit more. Alright guys, so today I decided to rank every makeup of the past decade in 3 categories. The first one is gonna be aesthetic. Aesthetic, it will be very personal and subjective because this is also considered beautiful by others, but not me. Number 2, wearability, meaning how wearable it is. Number 3, first, I wanted to include number of makeup products that people are using, but it's not fair because many decades ago, they just had several makeup products, as opposed to now we have every kind of a product. I decided to go for the word authenticity, and English is my second language, so I'm not sure. I was trying to name the third category, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I decided to call it authenticity. What I mean by that is just how it is aligning to the face of a wearer, because there's a certain makeup and how much it is changing your natural coloration or your natural facial features and proportions. Because the more it's changing, the less authentic it is, the less real basically for your face it is. And then I'll combine all the numbers and we will see makeup that is most beautiful and wearable and authentic, and the least. I want to start with 1920s actually, because this is when we have this massive change and very bright, interesting makeup, because before that was mostly actresses or courtesans that were wearing makeup, or night dancers, and in regular life women were wearing makeup. Before it was powder and some blush. And also I'm gonna look on all those makeups from the viewpoint of present time, of 2022. We now have our standards, we now have certain aesthetic that is trending, so I basically am gonna have the eyes of a modern girl. So 1920s, revolution, flapper girl, women rights. And of course I understand that women were wearing different makeup during the day probably, because in the silent movies they were wearing a lot of makeup, very dark eyes, those concealed lips, dark smaller lips and thin brows. But let's just take the makeup that as we know now, that signature one, something that was the brightest point in that decade itself, something that would actually highlight the decade. So of course during the day probably women would wear just simple mascara and something on their lips. But if we look at that 20s makeup as we know it now, of the actresses and stuff, in the evening, women would go out, they would try to do something close to those actresses because that considered great aesthetic. What considered great aesthetic back then? So huge eyes that were downturned, first of all, droopy, and a lot of color, a lot of dark color, dark lips, and concealed actually here, the concealer, and very thin brows that were sometimes even shaved completely off, and then they would draw that very thin line. I'm gonna rate each makeup now on these 3 categories: wearability, authenticity, and aesthetic. But I decided that I'm not gonna give anyone number 10 because it's still a makeup. It still can't be 100% wearable, 100% authentic, and even aesthetic. I just thought out of 10, 9 would be my highest point. So number 1, I'm gonna talk about wearability. For this particular makeup, 1920s, I would rate it 2 for wearability, because still concealed lips, darker eyes with droopiness, and you're wearing all that stuff on your face and those thin brows. So basically, yeah, I think wearability is 2. Now, authenticity is also 2, because downward you had to do droopy eyes. You had to make your lips much smaller. It doesn't matter what your natural shape is. You had to make your brows disappear basically. Who has naturally that thin brows? Nobody, right? And number 3, aesthetic. I love each makeup in each category, to be honest. I would put 9 for each one, but then I thought I'm looking at it from a viewpoint of today, where we measure makeup enhancing our features and our health. We wanna now look glowy and healthy with makeup and kind of exaggerate our own features to make them look more attractive and more beautiful. So in terms of that, I would say that I would put 3 in aesthetic for this kind of makeup, only because it looks a bit too heavy. It doesn't look very healthy. I think it's not complementing to facial features. I think thin brows, absolute downturned brows, downturned eyes, making this very sad appearance, and for uplifted faces it's fine, but what is for us droopy girls, you know, with swollen faces, with downward lines and with puffiness? We need something tighter up there. So that is what I give. Don't throw rotten tomatoes on me. It's just my viewpoint. And you can write your comments down below. I'm very curious about what ratings you would give to this. What would be your favorite makeup? Okay, let's go to 1930s. 1930s, we get calmed down a little bit. Brows are still thin, but maybe not so downturned anymore. They are more arched. Blush is not as intense as in 20s, and eyes are much calmer, not as much eyeshadow. And so we have lashes, and actually in the 30s, lower lashes, more intense, were more popular. So you would actually make your lower lashes pop, which is very interesting. So let's go. First, wearability, how wearable it is. I would go for 5. I think it's more or less wearable now. Why 5? Why not 9? Because of course we don't overpluck our brows nowadays. We don't over exaggerate our lower lashes necessarily. We just don't do this. First, contouring actually started at that time. Number 2, authenticity. I would say 6. I don't see they changing their face very much. They started contouring their face thanks to Marilyn. They were shading under the cheekbones to create that chisel look. Now, for authenticity, I would say that they sometimes would make the weird shaping of their lips. They would outline their top lip, for example. Very weirdly, they would do rounded on the sides, and then in the center, it would be a very low Cupid's bow, which looked pretty interesting from my viewpoint. A very low center of the lip. Things that are further from nature. Lower lashes exaggerated, so all those things, and overplucked brows, of course, so all those things are kind of like going to that direction. Aesthetic, I would give it 6 personally from my viewpoint. I think it's very beautiful makeup. They're just some weird additions, but still very pretty and very calm makeup. Yeah, not as bright as in the 20s. Now let's go to 1940s. It's like a wartime. That was even less makeup. Our brows got thicker, arched, defined, less eyeshadow, lower lashes not as heavy. I think it's just because makeup became more authentic because of that time. It was wartime, women started working and they didn't do many manipulations with their faces too much. So I would say that wearability, I would go for 8. It's pretty wearable. Yeah, you just put some red lipstick, you just put some lashes, draw some brows, and you go. So not much to do. Some blush, not very much contouring, not very much addition, not much eyeshadow, basically what we would probably do now, right? So authenticity, number 7, because again of a thinner brows, this is one thing that is further from that very natural look, authentic look. Aesthetic, I would go for 8. Again, personal. 1950s, wow. Glam femininity, extra femininity, red lips, lashes, eyeliner, and a bit thicker brows. So how wearable it is? I would say 8. Why not 9? Because it's still exaggerated glam a little bit. It's lash liner. It could be lash extensions, and it could be just red lips, red color itself is just pretty intense, but women would wear this in the morning, believe it or not. They would sleep on their rollers. One my friend told me the stories how her mother would do. So she would sleep on her rollers the whole night, and then she would wake up and just do her makeup, do her lips, take off the rollers, like curls and stuff, wife, ready to do work around the house, ready. So that is wearability. Now, authenticity, I would go for 7. Just because there still was some correction, overdrawing the lips, and lip color was pretty bright. So that is probably that authenticity thing. Aesthetic, I would go for 9, because 9, it's kind of like a top rate for me. That because it's a red carpet makeup. It's very aesthetic pleasing from my viewpoint, from nowadays, from our time. 1960s, it's kind of mods and Twiggy and something in between for every day. Now, wearability would be probably 3, because lashes, crazy lashes, sometimes they would draw the lashes underneath there on the bottom. Huge unblended crease outlines sometimes unblended on the bottom. Caking on darker powder sometimes for that extra tan, so they would have that lighter lips as a contrast to the darker tan. So that happened in the 60s. Whiter lipstick, that's why it goes for 3. Authenticity, again, goes for 3. Different coloration. Sometimes some paler women, they literally would go with orange faces. Too much geometry on the eyes, so no matter what eye shape you have, if you're doing this 60s makeup, basically your eyes look more or less same. It looked like sketch on the face. So also drawn lashes on the back and drawn crease color. So not very authentic. And aesthetic, aesthetic, I would go for 7. I think it still looks pretty cool, especially with the photos on the photos. With that contrasted photos. Photo cameras back then, they were not very good quality, not like our cameras. So you couldn't actually see what exactly was done there. And the contrast of the photo itself was pretty big, so that looked, yeah, cartoonish, yeah, drone, but I just think that those bright eyes, those pale lips, all that looked kind of cool. 1970s, back to nature, tan, green and blue eyeshadow, pale makeup, light makeup. Now, wearability, I think 9, because it's very natural, it's like everybody can do it, it's very wearable. Some eyeshadow, some lashes, natural brows, not much to do. Some blush, sometimes natural colored lipstick or no lipstick. Tan, sometimes you can just go for tan and just apply some mascara. Authenticity, I would say 5, just because of the colors. Because green and blue eyeshadow, that was not very natural for anyone, first of all. It's not like you are applying something brown on your crease and your eyes look still pretty natural, but you're just enhancing your eye shape. No, it's just literally bright blue or bright green eyeshadow. And not everybody would look great with this kind of eyeshadow, especially if the eyeshadow was very light. They sometimes would make swollen eyes and swollen faces a bit more swollen. So some of women were washed out completely with this kind of makeup, very light eyeshadow and very light pale lipstick. Especially some women, they were not tan, but they still were using same makeup. So with being not tan, having that very light skin, light and sometimes bluish color, like we sometimes in Russia in winters used to have, that bluish transparent skin when you can see veins and you're really lacking that color on your face, and you have this green eyeshadow and that pale orangey lipstick, that all looked kind of like too liquidy on the face, like a jellyfish slightly. Really asked for a little bit more, so I give it 5 for authenticity. Number 3, aesthetic, I would go for 6, just because on some it was on point, on some it just didn't look right, it didn't look healthy enough, didn't support the healthiness of that face and the body enough. 1980s, camera now could show anything, any color. So cosmetic industry created loads of different colors of an eyeshadow. Now we have pink eyeshadow, purple eyeshadow, blue-green, of course, brown and orange, and whatever you prefer. It was very colorful, and it was eyeshadow to the brow, and also there was a lot of pearl in lipstick sometimes. So that was the biggest points in the 80s. How wearable it was, I would give it 3, because too many products during the day. If you would wear like this, of course not everybody would wear this during the day, but I'm just generalizing, of course. I'm generalizing, I'm looking at it as the most popular makeup of the decade, basically. That kind of makeup that we can recognize the decade by. Authenticity, I would give it 2, because colors, first of all. Colors could not fit even each other. I'm not talking about fitting a woman. The brows were darker, area of blending was huge, so all that could look clownish. So that is why I'm giving that number 2 for authenticity. And I actually knew some women who really were going out in the evening just for the restaurant, having all those different colors and purple with pearl up to their brows, very dark brows, drawn brows, then outlining their eyes, no blending at all, a lot of mascara, very bright pearl pink lipstick. So I personally saw this. That is kind of a stamp on the decade. Number 3, aesthetic, I would give it 5. Not the highest, but not the lowest, because you can actually find some great examples too. There are some 80s makeups that I still think are pretty aesthetic, and I myself made the video about 80s, and this picture of this 80s makeup actually became the avatar of my channel. So this is basically what you see all the time when you come to my channel, and I just like it, but it just depends on how it's done. So I just decided to go for less colors for that one and just concentrate more on a scheme of the placement. 1990s, minimalism. It came with Kate Moss. It was matte skin because digital cameras appeared. So digital cameras were still not very good quality, and they were a little bit grayish. So they couldn't show too many bright colors. So every time you would have something shimmer on your face, it would turn it into like a white spot. So shimmers were not recommended. So this is why matte everything happened. And then matte face, matte brick colored lips, not very exaggerated eyes as well. Wearability, I would say 9. Pretty wearable, because the lipstick is not very bright, and not very bright lipstick pretty much fits everyone, and it looks okay during the day, as well as during the evening. Not very bright eyes, matte face, yeah, more or less okay. And then normal brows, the brows that you would naturally wear. Authenticity, I would say 9 as well, because again, they didn't change anything on their face too much. Sometimes they didn't even use contouring. Very popular product for the face was powder or powdery foundations that would be matte for your skin. So that would be basically just brows, eyelashes, and that brick lipstick. They didn't try to change much in terms of coloration as well. Aesthetic, I would go for 7, just because sometimes it would be too dry skin. Sometimes it could be too heavy lips, too heavy, too brown, for some too dark. And also sometimes it could be too sharp brows. That I just give little minuses for this. When I was thinking about this video, I pretty much know very well each decade. So when I was preparing this video, it was very easy for me. I just wrote some bullet points for myself on a piece of paper. But when I came to 2000s, I was like, so I had to go Google it. I couldn't concentrate. My attention was so dispersed. So I was like, yeah, but what are those most important points in 2000 makeup? I couldn't even think about this. So after I Googled it, after I've seen many pictures, first of all, that could be slightly shimmery light eyeshadow on top and more exaggerated line on the bottom. So sometimes there would be no line on the top and line on the bottom. That is 2000s. Another thing is a pencil technique. So they would do that crease color around the eye with a pencil. They had mixture of everything. Everything that happened before, they got it and mixed in a very random way, without any certain idea or direction, I think. So it was like mishmash of everything, but I don't know why I'm mixing this thing. Cool, let's do this. Now some old-fashioned makeup artists or makeup artists that are not interested in modern techniques, they still work with pencil technique, and they do this kind of like a pencil kind of a makeup for brides with this very stiff curls, you know, and those very intense eyeshadow with very shimmery, combining very, very shimmery and very, very matte eyeshadow on top of that pencil technique. So they still do this. Wearability, I would say it's 4, and I don't understand why, just 4. Authenticity is 4 because of this upside down technique of an eye makeup, I would say. And just in general, that shimmery eyeshadow, they are not suited to everyone. It's actually very little amount of people who look good with this shimmery, silverish eyeshadow, because it really makes the skin look swollen and makes any eye, almost any eye, look hooded, even if the eye is not hooded. Aesthetic 4, because still some makeups, they look good of 2000s. Look at Mariah Carey. I like this one makeup. I think it's beautiful. And it's still 2000s. 2010 is a very interesting time in makeup because of YouTube. YouTube started, makeup industries got crazy. They started earning a lot of money and they started inventing products that we don't even need just so we would buy them. Drag queen makeup became very popular because many of drag queens started showing themselves on YouTube. Also Instagram makeup, tons of new products, and as far as brands started creating a lot of new products to sell, they started sending it to bloggers for free so they would promote those products. And when they were sending them for free, they had to somehow incorporate it into their makeup. So makeup became more and more complicated. Much more layers, one on another. And sometimes I could see girls, I remember I was watching YouTube, a girl would go like that to a shop in the middle of the day, kind of like having that drag queen makeup, very heavy makeup, young girl. I think a lot of that was inspired by Kim Kardashian red carpet looks, and people really, it really was the point when kind of any woman nowadays sitting at home and buying just several makeup products, knowing the correct techniques, can look like she's on a red carpet. She can look like her makeup was done by a professional makeup artist, because before that, it was a big difference between a woman is doing makeup for herself and then professional makeup artist is doing makeup for her. That was two different people. You could not recognize her. And 2010, it was the time when women started learning how to be their own professional makeup artists. And that was a huge point. And this is why the cosmetic industry started earning much more money than before, because now instead of 20 makeup artists, they can have 20,000 makeup artists who need all that collection. And then we have also important points like Cara Delevingne with her brows also made this new trend for the brows, and many women who had before were trying to pluck their brows, shape them more thin. Now they were ready to grow them back. So that was a big trend. And then women who didn't have that hairy brows, they actually was trying to create an illusion of a hairier brows. So brow salons started again earning much more money. Brow products, they have, like, instead of 2 brow products, we now have 20 or 30 of them. Yeah, so that happened that back then. And then contouring became huge because Kim Kardashian also showed that yellow triangle under her eyes. So wearability, I would give it 3, just because you're going to a grocery store with false eyelashes. Authenticity, I would give it 3, because with this heavy contour and heavy eye makeup, it totally changes the face of people. You could not recognize the girl underneath that's mask of makeup. Think about drag queens, right? With this kind of makeup, a man could turn into a woman very easily. So that is what kind of makeup it is. And then aesthetic, I would give it 8, just because for the evening, for the red carpet, it's actually pretty high standard, pretty well done, very professional looking, glamorous makeup for red carpet, and it's supposed to look glamorous and beautiful. Now 2020 and 2021, 2022, this aesthetic is still here. We got COVID, so everybody was sitting home. Now we don't have to have this full face of a makeup anymore to go out. We have new game, skincare. So we are all about now healthy skin, glowing skin, minimum makeup, clean girl aesthetic. This is how it's called today. Hailey Bieber, she was one of those who inspired many people on this very clean girl kind of aesthetic with glowy skin, with blush. That was actually started on TikTok because one model on TikTok, she just made this no makeup look, very glowy skin, a lot of blush, rosiness, pinkiness, cheekiness. And then she got a comment on TikTok. Somebody said, oh, it's like a clean girl aesthetic. And then it just became viral, and clean girl aesthetic actually comes from that comment. They also call it that girl. Clean, expensive, taking care of her health, having a healthy diet, healthy beauty routine, healthy sleep routine. I'm gonna actually do the video about clean girl version of myself. She's very polished. See, she smells nice. And she's wearing expensive jewelry, kind of a thing. So wearability, I would say 9. Because they are actually minimizing the amount of products they're using. Not all of them. Some girls actually go for a lot of products to achieve that look that doesn't look like she has any makeup basically on her. But it's sometimes achieved by loads of products. But anyway, the majority of girls, they are trying to get less products and also more natural products. And if it's more natural products, it's much more wearable, right? So every day you feel like you are not clogging your pores. It's like something more natural in your face anyway. Authenticity, I would go for 8. We're still using a lot more product than it looks like. Cheating with contouring. We're still cheating with skin appearance. Like it's just a bare skin without any foundation, but actually there is a lot of foundation sometimes even concealer and some glowing products as well underneath. And it's also not for everyone, because some women, they do feel like they're swollen and they look more tired with this kind of makeup. So they feel like they have to add some natural eyeshadow on their eyes, natural color, matte brown eyeshadow, for example, on their eyes, like just to reduce the puffiness, the swellenness. Some women do actually want that. Not everyone also looks great with all over glowing skin, because again, it exaggerates different lines and not even skin surfaces. So, and for some women, matte skin looks healthier actually. Aesthetic, I would go for 9, because I still think that it's emphasizing natural beauty and kind of like emphasizing that health in your face. Now I'm gonna show you the results. So I'm gonna go from the lowest to the highest. I want to remind you though that I adore each decade of the makeup, and I love those makeups, and I love doing them even sometimes the theme on my own face. I just love it. It's just the numbers. I was curious about the numbers, like which numbers I would give. First but not least is 20s. It got 7 points. Next one is 80s. It got 10 points. Next one is 2000. It got 12 points. Next one is 60s. It got 13 points. Next one is 2010s. It got 14 points. Next one is 30. It got 17 points. Next one is 70s. It got 20 points. Next one is 40s. It got 23 points. And now 3 winners. So winner number 3 is the 50s. I got 24 points. Next one is 90s. It got 25 points. And I actually, when I was doing this video, I was curious myself what I would get in the end, what would be like for me. A lot of it is based on my personal opinion. Probably you would have absolutely different numbers. I was just trying to explain you the logic behind all this. Number one, the winner of today is 2020, which is interesting. I'm a very vintage girl, you know? I'm very vintage girl. And I don't like almost anything modern, but it got 26 points, the biggest. Looks like I like modern makeup. I like it on women, and I like the healthy viewpoint on things. I think it's very healthy not to fight with your nature, but just enhance it. And we're gonna see what's next. I mean, I'm curious. We've had everything. Let me know, guys, what you think is gonna happen in 10 years or in 8 years, like in 2030s. Because trends are in circle, right? I don't know if we are repeating any trends right now. The closest probably is to 70s with its nature. What is the next step? Maybe the next step would be injected foundation. Just a hint for cosmetic industry. For me, it was a lot of fun to do this video. I hope that was fun for you to watch. Thank you and goodbye.